Alright, Arkham, I'm ready for you now. Got my trusty stick, my trusty knife. I'm ready for whatever you can throw me. Give me your best shot. Hey everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Broken Meeple. Welcome to another review. Today I am looking at the latest expansion to one of my favourite horror-themed dungeon crawl atmospheric Cthulhu games there is. I've been phasing out a bit on dungeon crawls and that style of game, but this one still rings true to my heart because it brings in that lovely Cthulhu mythos. It's wonderfully atmospheric, the app implementation is top-notch. Minor issues, goes on a bit long, but then I pretty much play it solo anyway, and I blast the soundtrack off the TV and the app on the screen. It's so good. But that is Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. Specifically today, Streets of Arkham. This is the newest expansion to come out, and they didn't exactly wait long before they decided to announce their next one, did they? The Sanctum of Silence or whatever, I don't know. You'll see a picture. But for crying out loud, Fantasy Flight, give me a chance! Before you start announcing new expansions, let me play through this one, okay? My God. Oy, oy, oy. Oh well, new content for a game I like is never necessarily a bad thing, just slow down, okay? Be nice. Anyway, Streets of Arkham is similar in scope to what Beyond the Threshold was. That was the previous big box expansion, and they function in a similar manner. They give you some investigators, scenarios, a new mechanic, more monsters, more cards, more of the good stuff basically. So if you enjoy Mansions of Madness already, you're probably already thinking of getting this, even though it is a tad on the expensive side, I will admit. But generally what most people are wondering is, should they get this one first? Does this bring in anything that's more interesting to the mechanics? Does it fix any problems, that kind of thing? And are the investigators and monsters worth considering? So I'm just going to go over each element in turn, starting with the non-scenario aspects, and then I'll go into those in more detail, but I'll try and keep it spoiler light, okay? So, the investigators. You get 4 in the box, and each of them are pretty decent, except maybe one I'm not a fan of. You've got a rookie cop who starts the game with a massive shotgun already, a massive rifle. I think they call it Becky, and it's a high damage firearm, and that's his special ability. Apart from that, he's pretty generic, but starting the game with a fully loaded rifle is a pretty good way to survive against combat. Another one is a bootlegger who has this cool little movement ability where before or after you do a search action, those question mark search tokens, you can move a space before or after the action. That's very handy for giving you some extra maneuverability, especially if you were previously worried about having to run out of time to collect a lot of those search tokens. So I do like using them quite a bit. Another one who I quite like is the Entertainer, the singer Marie, I believe her name is. And with her, she's obviously very good at influence, but she's able to cast a spell every turn at the start without using an action. Give her a spell and let her go nuts. It's a little bit restricted that it's at the start of your turn specifically, but for a combat spell that's pretty decent because it means that if you got caught unawares and you've still got an adversary that you're fighting, start your turn, you get a free attack. Never nothing to sneeze at. And if you've got a utility spell that's semi-useful, like healing horror and that kind of thing, can come in quite handy. The fourth one I'm not a big fan of. It's the Reformed Cultist. And I mean, I'm not giving them by name because I can't remember their names off by heart. I know them by their, their occupation, their job title, that kind of thing. That's how I tend to remember them. My Arkham lore is not, pinpoint accurate. And I've still got to read that Investigator's book. I'm still barely even a quarter of the way through it. I really need more time to read. Anyway, I digress. So the Reformed Cultist isn't that impressive, in my opinion. Fantastic if you can give her a spell, because her lore is ridiculously high. 5 dice for lore, that's pretty good. So she's certainly good for a lot of the spells and some of the puzzles you come across. But her ability is simply that if you would take 2 or more horror, you instead take 1 fewer horror. Now, granted, that sounds good. She's more resilient. She only has 5 sanity. That's not a lot of sanity to have, even if you are taking less, horror in regard. Even if you're taking less, you're going to hit that pretty quickly. It's 5 or 6, one of the two. But she doesn't have a lot of sanity to cope with that, that little help or so. So I'm a little bit hesitant to want to take her too often, because I feel she'll go insane far too quickly. Because if anybody knows anything, it is a lot easier to take horror in this than it is to take damage. So going insane can be quite quick with this girl, but then she's a Reformed Cultist, so maybe that's kind of fitting. In terms of new mechanics, there's only really two, and they're very simple. One of them is the improvement tokens. These basically allow you to improve the skills on your sheet by 1, maximum 1 per ability. Certain things during the game will allow you to improve a skill, and you just choose which one. I like the fact you get to choose, it's not forced. That's pretty cool. And like I say, it's a neat little extra. And I think they already put it in Eldritch Horror anyway a long time ago. And then the other one is Elixirs. Elixirs are these little potions that certain effects in the game will let you get one. And at the start of your turn, you may just get rid of it, drink it, and improve a skill of your choice. Pretty sweet. Except you then flip the card to see what else the elixir does. So, a nice little... I always like these multiple copies of the same thing, but you don't know which effect you've got. Always like that with the spells, and same carries over with the elixirs. But apart from that, they're pretty straightforward mechanics, so certainly nothing too complicated in this one. The monsters... Oh my god, the monsters! Wow. Okay, the easy ones, you get hired guns. Yeah, hired goons. Pretty much like criminals, so they're pretty generic, but you need them in the game. Because after all, if you know the Arkham lore, you know there's the Sadie's gang, and was it the Sheldon gang and the O'Bannons? I can't remember their names, but I'm sorry, I suck at Arkham lore. But you've got the rival gangster groups in Arkham basically going nuts. It's that time period. But the monsters, hired goons, skeletons. So occasionally you see a little skeleton, standard issue. I'm surprised we haven't seen them earlier, but so I suppose skeleton is more thought of as a kind of D&D fantasy type thing, not so much a Arkham horror thing, but you can get skeletons every now and again. They're still horrific. But the big monsters in this. Oh my god! I think they're called star vampires or star something. I think it's star vampires. And they are horrific. These are like just a swarm of tentacles with this like jaw. It's about that kind of shape with teeth along the side. It is a big enough model as it is. And it looks nasty. I mean, god blimey, I'd be running to be fair, I'd run a mile if I saw any of these things really, but except maybe the hired goons. But yeah, those star vampires are pretty nasty. It's like, oh my god. But they look cool, it looks horrific, it fits that theme nicely. And then you get the queen. Not the queen star vampire, just the queen, as I like to call it. I believe it's called a Lithgor or a Litigor or something like that. It's I forget the spelling, but wow. You would have seen it in the intro video to this, and it's a big model. In fact, I can't really get it out, but it's a huge model. This thing towers above most things, and yes, you have had things like the Cthulhu Star Lords or whatever they're called. The ones from the original game. They were pretty big as well, and you've had the occasional Cthulhonian or whatever they're called. The giant worm things. It's like that. But this, I think, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest model they've brought out. Possibly the Dunwich Horror might be bigger, but this thing is big. It is this giant. I believe I think it walks on 4 feet or so. It's got a giant tail. It's all barbed. It's got claws. It's got this huge, it's almost, kind of reminds me of a xenomorph head in a sense. It's got no eyes and it's got a curved head back, but it's got loads of teeth. It is this towering monstrosity. It is like a barbed Godzilla. It is huge. and you do fight this thing, and it will be brown trouser time when you see it first appear, and it's just like, okay, run, get out of there. It is such a cool model, though. I really like it. The monsters in this universe is just ripe with some of the most interesting and horrific monsters I've ever heard of. D&D, even Deadlands. Actually, I don't know. Deadlands, the RPG, that came up with some pretty horrific monsters from time to time, but it just doesn't hold a candle to Arkham Horror with the imagination that goes into some of these things. But I'm praising that too much. The monsters in this are cool. Alright, they're really cool. So now let's go into the scenarios. Yes, this is one of the bigger ones for scenarios. It gives you a whole 3 in the box. I believe Beyond the Threshold might have only given you 2. You had at least 3, if not 4, in the starting base box, and then you got an extra one with the sort of first edition reprints, in a sense. They gave you some more tiles, but they were reprint of first edition stuff. It might have even been 2 missions apiece. And you've got DLC on top of that. I believe the app now has 13 to 14, 13 or 14 missions in it now. I keep thinking it's 13. And there's a lot of missions by the time, if you've bought everything. Of course, that's a pretty big investment, but you've got a lot of content with this game. So the 3 scenarios, what do you have? Well, first you have a kind of like a stargazing one with the Miskatonic University. You'll go there and you have to investigate, something that a scientist is coming up with, and it's very much tapping into that kind of beyond the stars type idea. So the astrology, alien creatures as opposed to anything on this planet, that kind of thing. And it's quite combat heavy. In fact, this is probably my least favourite of the 3. It's not a bad scenario, and it's quite condensed in its locations, and it's the shortest one in the box. So this is your quickest of the 3 scenarios. But it is quite combat heavy. You're fighting from the get-go, and it's only going to get more relentless. I think that's actually a good word for it. It is relentless, and you need to be quick on your feet as well. So definitely play this with at least 3 investigators. In fact, to be honest, you shouldn't play Mansions of Madness with less than 3 investigators anyway, because it takes forever to cover everything on the board, and you just run out of time. So 3 investigators minimum. But this is more combat heavy. It's a cool story, and it certainly has its fair share of good horrific story effects, but this one is more for those who want to, smack down a lot of bad guys. It does the trick with that one. The next one, which is probably, I would say from a story point of view, probably one of my favourites, actually. I mean, this is probably my favourite in the box. Because it has a good mix of everything. Yeah, I quite like this one. This is the second scenario, which is the longest. It takes a good 3 to 4 hours plus, and it's multi-location. And it basically it talks about the 2 gangster groups, and they are at each other's throats, and the newspapers are going, oh great, are they going to start a full-on war? So you're investigating a murder that's taken place, which has been blamed on these guys. Each one is blaming the other, and you are investigating the circumstances of the murder. So you're collecting pieces of the puzzle, like evidence that suggest, hang on, it's not quite what they think it is. And occasionally you'll get a monster jump you, but there's a lot of people interaction in this one. You come across all sorts of people throughout this scenario, and you talk to them, you engage in speech. It's a really good, rich, story-driven narrative with a cool mystery behind it. Granted, it's not difficult to figure out the mystery, but it's there. And you, of course, have to collect as much evidence as you can to support this theory before you get to the end. So it's a cool kind of detective-style scenario with some combat, some cool narrative, and, of course, a pretty big finale. So, it's a solid one, and I really enjoyed playing this one. This probably is my favourite of the 3. The last one it feels a little bit different than before. There's elements of combat in it, but with this one, if you look at the difficulty rating on some of these, they're pretty hard. I mean, even a 3-star, scenario can be pretty difficult. And just to let you know, the gang one was 3-star, and I think that was kind of fair. It will challenge you at times, and there is a pretty big, nasty to have to contend with it now and again, but, it is possible to do it. It's a 3-star, maybe 4 max, but no higher than that. The stargazing one is a 4-star, and that's definitely, I would almost call it 5. But then again, play it with too few investigators, it will be a 5. But yeah, it's definitely at least a 4-star, that one, and that one is 4 on the app. This one is a 5. There are not many, I'm not even sure if there is another 5 in this. There might be one other. 5-star is horrifically difficult. And this one is pretty difficult as well. But I don't want to say too much on it because it would spoil too much. This is a bigger mystery one than ones that have come before. Because you're in a museum and artifacts, certain artifacts are in there and people are getting killed off. And you're sort of wondering what is causing it? Which artifact is it? And you have to piece together a pretty, involved mystery. In fact, the app actually requires you, well, don't require you, it suggests you take notes while you're doing it. No other scenario does this, not any of the other deductive ones. This is the one that says you should take notes. So take that for what it's worth when thinking, ooh, this has actually got more of a puzzle or a mystery to it. I can't say much more about it because I don't want to spoil it, because I feel this is definitely one that you need to play. It's the medium length one, so if you imagine, let's say the stargazing one's about 2 hours solo, 2.5, then the gang one's a good 4 or 5 or something with a group. This one's in the middle, so maybe about 3 or so. I mean, it's hard to really gauge this with time because, yeah, we do know one of the problems with Mansions of Madness is that it takes a bit long. I admit this, that's why I only play it solo. But yeah, they are pretty lengthy scenarios, but they're all pretty good scenarios. The combat one I can take or leave, but the other two, solid. I like this mystery one, I thought it was pretty good, just a bit hard. And the gang one I thought was a brilliant story narrative and probably my favourite of the 3. So you're getting a good amount of content and solid content in this. 2 new mechanics that are straightforward but interesting. Some really cool monsters. 4 new investigators, of which 3 of them I would like to use often. But like I say, you might get more use out of that Reformed Cultist. But like I say, 4 more investigators, so you've got more stuff. And of course, you get a few more bits of equipment and spells and stuff like that. So it's always nice to bolster up those piles. The app works fine with it, and as I say, you've now got a lot of scenarios to pick from, assuming that you buy a couple of those downloadable content ones, which I do recommend you do. I mean, it's another few quid, but it's no different from buying an expensive app, and it will give you another good few hours of gameplay. So can't knock it for that kind of DLC. But I can't really say much more, except for one big thing. Let's assume that you have bought everything to date, okay? I have this giant box for Mansions of Madness, right? Well, everybody does. Oh my god, it's heavy. So this is Mansions of Madness, right? This giant box. You'll notice I've got 2 boxes here. You'll also notice I haven't chucked this across the room like I normally do. That's because I need it. This has stuff in it. If you have got everything to date, you cannot fit everything in this box. It is impossible. I will make that stipulation. If you can get everything to date, that is this set, the 2 little first edition reprint expansions, Beyond the Threshold, and this, in this box, I want to see pictures. I want a step-by-step diagram of how you've done it. I cannot see how it is physically possible. This game is crying out for a decent insert from someone like Broken Token and that, but I don't see how they could physically design one, because every time an expansion comes out, you've got more miniatures, you've got more stuff, you've got more of those thick tiles. For like half of this box is just the tiles. There's so many rooms now. It's ridiculous. I don't think you ever could design an insert for this. You would need something like the big legendary vault in that I've got up there in order to contain this. It's ridiculous. But I digress. So, if you own everything to date, you are going to need the 2 boxes. I put all the rooms in this, along with all the monsters, and all the tokens and cards and investigators go in here. And the rules. That tends to work out pretty well. I was able to fit everything in this box before I got this expansion, just. You can just about do it before this, but when you've got those massive monsters, and the more rooms, and everything, it's just not possible. So I have 2 boxes for this, and to be honest, when the next expansion comes out, I'll be wondering if I'm going to need a 3rd box, because it's just a lot of content. This will eventually, I think, take up an entire Kallax square. That's how much I think this is going to get out of hand. Oh well, but like I say, still a solid expansion to an already great game. So I would probably want to give this a decent solid, let's see, personally, it gives you some good, I'd give it a 9. I'd give it a 9. There's some great monsters, some cool investigators, easier mechanics to learn, and the free scenarios, even if I can take or leave the first one, are all solid. I don't think there is a dud scenario in here. Like I say, if you can afford it, because it's not the cheapest expansion in the world, I will give you that, because big plastic models are going to cost a bit, as well as all the luxurious stuff in here. It is still a solid one. Should you get this one first, then you know what? You can pretty much get them in any order you like. The app allows you to input what your collection is, and it will base the room tiles and the monsters and that on what you have. So you can get these expansions in any order you like. But maybe if you want more content in terms of games, maybe you should consider getting this one first, because it gives you the free scenarios. I don't think Beyond the Threshold gave you 3. I think it only gave you 2. I will double check, but I'm pretty certain it only gave you 2. And then I think you only got a max of 2, maybe even 1 from those other ones. So this is giving you the most scenarios out of all of them. And if that's what you're mainly interested in, to have more scenarios as opposed to the extra cards and stuff, then by all means, grab this one first, and that's a decent stepping point. After that, I still recommend getting the other expansions. Any of them. The first edition reprints are pretty cool, but maybe I suppose I would personally say grab this one first, then Beyond the Threshold. Then if you have the money and the time, you can grab the other ones, or you can use the downloadable content ones. The first edition reprints are cool, but you might have already seen part of the plots from those editions, and they're good, but I don't think they are essential. I mean, to be fair, none of them are essential, but I certainly think that the official second edition expansions, this and Beyond the Threshold, are better than the first edition reprint ones. So by all means, check them out. That's all I can really say. Great expansion. Love this game. It's in my top 10 of my top 100. So what more can I say? I love it. So until then, see you on the next Broken Meeple episode. And no matter how gribbly these monsters get, it's still only a game. So don't have nightmares. See you soon, guys. Take care.